Right. So we'll move on to NXT then, if everyone's happy. We all happy, guys?
I mean, I am. Orange? Yeah.
Okay, cool.
Cool.
We'll go on to NXT then. So NXT, surprisingly, they seem to go the complete opposite direction of the previous week. So they must have really took notes on the fact that no one liked the fact that there was no wrestling in a wrestling show. Weirdly, there. So we returned to Full Sail, surprisingly. So it wasn't in the Performance Center.
Mhm.
I wasn't expecting that, but presumably they have some sort of, because it's like their sort of home ground in a way. Full Sail. I don't know. So they had a good few matches. It was quite match heavy actually, this, but we started with Austin Theory having a match against Tyler Breeze, which they sort of touched on in the previous week. I'm not sure where they're going with it, but it was basically Tyler teaching Austin a bit of respect. Basically, Austin was coming out being a bit cocky. At one point, he got the upper hand and tried to use Tyler Breeze's phone to record a message to him, like basically your old hat now and we're the future and all this kind of bollocks. But then that distraction, him getting caught up in trying to mock Tyler, was what ultimately got Tyler the win. So I don't know if they're maybe building up a feud there, or whether that's it. I don't know. Or even if Tyler Breeze is staying on NXT for a while. But all in all, it was an okay match, and it wasn't exactly a squash, so it's not like he's come back to squash new talent. But it was a nice little, for a very short, put together story. It was a nice little sort of back and forth of cocky youngster versus the old vet, really. So that was, it was quite good, quite passable. Sorry, Carl, I forgot to ask. Have you seen this week's NXT?
So I took a similar stance to what you did with Raw and kind of skimmed it.
Okay. Yeah.
And it did feel like a lot of matches, as you were saying. But I think for this particular one, I feel like Austin Theory, they must have an eye for him, or there must be something about him, because he has been featured quite heavily. He's almost on every week now in some sort of prominent level of role. He was fighting Tommaso Ciampa a couple of times,
That's the
a
thing.
few
Well,
weeks ago. So
it makes it a bit puzzling actually, because he sort of got battered by Tomato, but he is there consistently every week, a bit randomly at this point. But I think like you say, I think they've got an eye for him. They're just trying to decide what they want to do with him, really.
yeah, and I think Tyler Breeze, he belongs on NXT. It's where he kind of came from in the first place, and I feel like it's just a better fit for him. So
Yeah,
I'm personally
I
glad to see him back there.
I enjoyed seeing him there, I must say, and I must admit I never really enjoyed him much when he was on SmackDown. I think that's probably because they were putting him with a few stupid gimmicks like the Fandango stuff and all that. But it's good to see him back on sort of home turf, as it were, really. Um, yeah, then we had there's not much to say about the next match. We had Killian Dane versus is it Tahuti Miles? I can't remember how to pronounce his first name, I'll be honest with you. But basically, I only want a quick mention because Killian Dane is obviously he's from the UK, and he actually is featured on some of the UK independents that I've seen. He's been on WCPW and so on. So I've seen him before, and it's nice to see that he is getting a bit of a head of steam. And it was a bit of a squash really for Miles. So it was good to see Killian being booked as this monster as well. I think he's got a lot of potential in the future. So I just wanted to give him a quick mention, really. Similarly with the next one, it was just another match for Cameron Grimes, who probably another one actually similar to Austin Theory, that he seems to be featuring consistently on NXT a fair bit, but with no specific plot going. He's just sort of there with having different matches, which is it's a good way of displaying the talent of that person. But it doesn't seem that they've got any sort of particular focus for him just yet. And to be honest, the match, it wasn't a bad match, but it felt a little bit like it was put together. Like, there's not many people here, so we'll throw these two in a match together, So there was a little bit of that. Right. So we had Io Shirai. I hope I'm pronouncing that right. I struggle. I never want to pronounce these wrongs, but Io Shirai versus Aaliyah. And this was actually originally meant to be Aaliyah versus Xia Li, but she wasn't medically cleared. And then we had the surprise return of Io Shirai, who was, I believe she was off on injury. So it was like hey, she's back sort of thing. And she came out strong and took the win. Now, this match was actually for the ladder match. it was going to be Takeover, but I believe they're not actually having Takeover, but they're still having the matches that were from Takeover, so it's going to be a little bit confusing there, really. But ultimately, she took the win, and she will be going forward into the ladder match. And to be honest, I feel like she might, looking at the performance here and the sort of the, you know, I can't say the pop from the crowd, but the way the commentating was speaking of her is like, you know, she's a big name to come back, and it'd be a great rivalry to see between her and Rhea Ripley. So it sounds like she might be a strong contender for winning the ladder match as well. Have you seen much of Shirai? Or?
Only little bits, but I know that she was really big in Japan. She was quite the coup when they did sign her. So I am interested to see where she goes. I'm not too sure what her injury was, but she has been off for quite a bit. So interesting that they've brought her back in time for this kind of little ladder match tournament thing. So I suppose if you are a liar though, or you'd be pretty pissed off, wouldn't you?
Oh yeah, yeah.
You're meant to be fighting someone else, and then she comes back and steals your spot. But yeah, I mean, fair play. It'd be interesting to see where Shirai goes.
Yeah. I mean, I'd say it's becoming an interesting one. I don't really know a lot of the talent in NXT, as I've mentioned once or twice, but the ladder match will be an interesting one for that display of like who's sort of looking dominant in the women's division for NXT, really. Because in my theory, and obviously this is a topic we're going to cover in the future, but in my theory, I think Rhea is going to retain the title. So I think obviously it's important to look at who she's probably going to face next. It'd be more interesting than Charlotte for me winning, but again, that's a topic for another segment. That really. So we move on to Dominik Dijakovic, Damian Priest, and Keith Lee all having a bit of a back and forth. Really, basically they want to fight Keith for the title, and they all kick off on one another essentially. Surprisingly, Dijakovic is the one who comes out strong here. He's the one left standing after they all have a bit of a back and forth. So I don't know whether it's going to be like the pushing for him to be the number one contender, or whether it's going to be some sort of triple threat. I'm not sure why Damian Priest is suddenly in the mix, but it's nice to see that the book and Dominik Dijakovic as a strong threat for Keith Lee, which they sort of have pushed into in the past as well. How do you feel about it, Cal?
I think it's going to be a good rivalry for Lee, to be fair, because he's a decent sized guy himself, Dijakovic. So I think it'll be quite an interesting battle for Keith.
Yeah, definitely, yeah. So it could be interesting to see how they look at booking it going forward, because as it stands right now, I don't think there's actually a match booked in for the North American Championship. So it'd be interesting to see what they do with it in terms of again, not technically takeover, but what, you know, match going forward on a standard NXT, I believe. And then so we had a tag match, I believe, of Danny Burch and Oney Lorcan versus Shane Thorne and Brendan. I can't remember his surname. Apologies. So basically, Danny Burch and Lorcan take the win, and the only note I've got for this match is like, who are these people? Why are they in a tag match, and what's going on? Again, another one that felt kind of thrown together. I'm not sure what the purpose of this sort of build was. It didn't seem to be like it was for any sort of push towards the tag titles or anything along that line, so I'm not quite sure the sort of motivation behind this. Again, I think it was probably just spot filling, if I'm honest. But again, it was very match heavy NXT, so it wouldn't have hurt not having this for me. Do you have any sort of love for this match of these people, Cal?
No, none. I think similar vibes to you. It was just kind of a bit of a. I mean, Oney Lorcan was pretty good on the indies, but I don't think he's ever been used very well by NXT. It's kind of a similar one to Killian Dane as well, really. They just, for whatever reason, haven't seemed to kind of break out in the time there. But yeah, I just felt like, as you've said, just we'll throw this match in. But did they need to when it was so match heavy? But yeah, it was there. It happened.
It was a thing and it happened, Carl.
It was a thing. It happened.
So we move on to another contenders match for the ladder match for the number one contender for the NXT Women's, or Is it NXT Women's title or is it just a shot? Yeah, it'll be a shot going forward when it's for the number one contender. So this one was Candice LeRae and Kaden Carter. To be honest, again, I'm not overly familiar with either of these wrestlers, but it was a very good match. It was fast paced. It was in a technical sense, it was very interesting to watch. And ultimately LeRae took the win, but I think both of them come out looking quite well from it. Really, it wasn't like a squash or anything like that. It was just a good match to watch and a good result, to be honest. Candice looks like she's going to be a future star.
She's been really, really good over the years on the indies. I think she's the real life fiance or wife of Johnny Gargano. But yeah, they've been kind of doing bits and bobs together on the indies for years, and I think she's always looked like a star, Candice LeRae. So I think she'll definitely make her way to the WWE roster at some point. Could even be as soon as post-Mania, but yeah, I think another good showing from her, really.
Yeah, but again, because when you're seeing stuff like this and you're seeing like Candice LeRae is looking really good, and we have Io Shirai, and they're like coming back, you look at it and go, well, this ladder match is going to be it'd be hard to call who's going to win, and I like it when it's not predictable, but it looks like it's going to be a really good match as well. So then we had Matt Riddle going up against Roderick Strong. Oh, okay. To be fair, Roderick come out with quite an aggressive start, but the interesting part with this was not so much the match itself. So I'll quickly just say, Roderick Strong came out looking strong, but ultimately Matt Riddle got the win. But the interesting part was the Nusos. The Nusos came out. Did you see the Nusos, Carl? So I joke that this tag team haven't been given a name, but essentially two Samoan guys came out and laid into Matt Riddle because ultimately they're going to be coming for the tag titles. How do we know this, Carl? Because Malcolm Bivens told us so. He's their manager. He's come out. To be fair, he shot a good promo, pumping them up. He chose this time because Riddle was going to be on his bill, basically. And these two guys are monsters, big Samoan monsters. So again, it was a good, nice little surprise. But weirdly, they never said this is who they are. It was just like, here's a new tag team who's going to kick your ass. So I've took to calling them the Nusos because they kind of look like them.
I mean, from what I hear, this Malcolm Bivens guys is quite the talker. He's got a bit of a reputation for doing a good promo, so I think he'll be important for them as their mouthpiece as they kind of try and find their feet in NXT. But interesting little debut there for them.
Yeah, I mean, I think that they're going to be doing it in a similar sense to when you get certain wrestlers who never talk. Not naming any names. When you get certain wrestlers who don't talk, and then obviously Bivens is going to be the mouthpiece for them because you couldn't get anything off. They weren't saying much. They were just coming out and sort of laying into Riddle. So he's definitely going to be the mouthpiece for the Heyman, if you will, of this sort of team. But I think that's probably the right call because he did do well with it. I wouldn't say he's a master on the mic from this one sort of thing I've seen, but he certainly promoted them well.
Yeah.
So then we move on to So the last segment of the night, we had Triple H coming out. He played the role of Dad, if you will. So he come out and he calls. Well, he didn't actually call Tommaso Ciampa to the ring. He starts talking, and then Tommaso comes out because, he's a badass and he's going to interrupt Triple H, and basically nothing's going to happen because Triple H didn't seem to care that he was interrupted. But there you go. So Triple H is basically telling them off. I can really relate to Triple H at this point because I'm a father myself and I have two children. So Triple H called his two children to the ring. He got Gargano out there as well, and he said, "Stop it. Stop fighting." That's basically what's happened. So he's basically said to them, it's not about. It ultimately lands to this. It's not about takeover, or it's not about a big platform to wrestle on. It's about settling this. So Triple H is going to find a random location. It was a bit odd this because they were very much like not disclosing the location. And then they agreed to have it, in 2 weeks' time. They're both going to go into a building that has a ring set up in it, and then only one is going to walk out. So presumably the other one's going to spend the night there. I don't know what they mean by that, to be honest. So there you go. And yeah, so that was sort of the gist of the promo. It felt very much like he's telling his kids off. It did tickle me that. And the segment was sort of not interrupted because they kind of concluded what they were doing. They both agreed, yeah, we're going to have this match. It's going to be in 2 weeks, and it's going to be in an undisclosed location. They even kind of made it sound like we're not going to get to see it. You're just going to see one of them walk out of the building, and we go, I guess he won. And then it was sort of interrupted, but not really, at the end by a sort of a segment for someone arriving, which is, I think it's fairly clear at this point that it's going to be Killer Cross, but it showed like a clock essentially hitting midnight, and then off the air we went. That was that. So I assume he's going to interject, or he's going to be the next rivalry for whoever wins against these two. I'm not sure, but yeah, that little bit of a video package at the end as well. And that was all she wrote, Cal. That was all she wrote. For me, this was, I'll give it a 3 because it was a vast improvement from last week's. It was okay. I think it almost went a bit match heavy as a reaction to last week, but there were some good bits in there. So it wasn't bad. It was better than Raw. So on that basis, I'll give it a 3, I think.
Yeah, agreed. So I'm coming out with a 2.5. So I think absolutely was better than Raw. I was quite critical of NXT when they just basically did that fucking clusterfuck of a show last week. So they definitely did answer back, but at the same time there was just a lot of matches on there. And some of them just felt like they were thrown together last minute. I think all in all there was some interesting stuff there. The debut of the Nusos, as you've coined. They made me laugh at the Papa H stuff, with all that going on, and then it is going to be Killer Cross, isn't it? So the little teaser there at the end as well were enough to kind of push it over. But all in all, I mean, NXT always does put on good matches, but probably just a few too many this week.
Yeah, no, I totally agree. Do you have any thoughts on it, Orange? Okay, fair enough.